The blood on his hands reached her before his name did. "Go home, Piccola," the Mafia boss said, his voice low enough to sound like a confession. "Whatever you think you saw tonight, don't make the mistake of caring about me." Elena Vetra was 23, orphaned young and small enough that strangers still mistook softness for helplessness. She restored broken clocks in a station workshop, carried lemon drops in her coat pocket, and believed lost things deserved patience before they deserved pity. In 2 minutes, she would ask a stranger in a ruined black coat the one question no one in his world had ever asked him. In 2 hours, she would be inside the locked estate of the most feared man in Naples, with armed guards at every door and his blood drying on her sleeve. The secret she hid was small enough to fit in her palm, a brass station key that had fallen from his hand into hers. It would either expose the man trying to destroy him, or unlock the reason he looked at her like she had found something in him he had buried alive. The station was never truly silent. Even after midnight, after the final announcement dissolved into static and the last commuters vanished into Naples' rain, sound lingered in the bones of the place. Metal settling, wind whirring the old beams, a clock somewhere behind the ticket hall losing half a second with each stubborn tick. I heard those things the way some people heard music. Broken mechanisms spoke if you were willing to be still long enough. I was locking up the restoration room when the smell hit first. Iron. Rain. Something burned. Not wine. Not rust. Blood. I turned with my ring of keys still in my hand and saw him at the far end of platform 9, under the yellowed station lamps that made everyone look a little unreal. He stood near the dead tracks in a black coat gone dark with rain, one hand braced against a pillar, the other hanging at his side. Blood striped his knuckles and disappeared under his cuff. More of it marked the white collar of his shirt. He looked less like a man who had won a fight than a man who had walked out of one and forgotten to bring himself with him. My first instinct should have been fear. Instead, absurdly, I noticed his shoes. Handmade. Black leather. Wet enough to reflect the light. A man like that did not arrive alone. A man like that meant there were others nearby, watching, deciding whether I was a witness or a problem. But he was looking at nothing. Not the tracks, not me, just some point inside the dark. So I heard myself ask, "Are you lost, mister?" The words went out into the empty platform and stayed there. His head turned slowly. He was beautiful in a way that made beauty feel like the wrong word. Hard mouth, dark hair damp at the temples, a cut at the edge of one brow. His face was controlled, but not calm, not really. His eyes found me and held. That was when I understood I had made a very bad decision. "Signorina," he said, voice roughened by something deeper than exhaustion. "You should go. I ought to have. Any sane woman would have, but I had lived 23 years on the edge of other people's emergencies. St. Marta Home taught you quickly that panic wasted time. Broken things needed hands, not hysteria. I took a step closer before I could talk myself out of it. Are you hurt?" A flicker crossed his expression. Not surprise exactly. Something sharper, as if I had spoken a language no one used with him. Behind him, rain hissed on the tracks. Somewhere outside, a motorcycle revved and faded. Then I saw it, his right hand clenched so tight around something metal that blood ran over his palm. "You're bleeding," I said. He looked down, as though the fact had only just occurred to him. A small, humorless breath left him. "That happens. I should say that I knew who he was before he told me." Naples knew him even when he was not in the room. Men lowered their voices around the name Raffaele Mancini. Mothers crossed themselves. Politicians smiled too carefully. He belonged to the city the way old violence did, buried deep enough to hold up the foundation. But in that moment, he was only a man standing under bad lights, with blood on his hands and grief moving behind his face like weather. My coat pocket crackled when I reached into it. I always kept lemon drops there because old station dust sat bitter on the tongue. I unwrapped one and held it out. His gaze dropped to the candy in my palm. "It helps," I said, suddenly embarrassed by how foolish I sounded, "when you're in shock." He stared at me for one endless beat. Then he made a sound small, wrecked, impossible. His eyes closed. When he opened them again, there was wetness there. Not much. Not dramatic. Just enough to turn the whole platform unreal. A blood-stained mafia boss with tears brightening his eyes because an orphan girl in a cheap wool coat had offered him sugar. He took the lemon drop. Not the way men usually took things from me. Not with carelessness. Not with superiority. His fingers brushed my palm like he was afraid to break something. "What's your name?" he asked. "Elena." He rolled it once in his mouth. Then his gaze moved over Mimi's station badge, the scuffed boots, the repair room keys, the caution I was trying and failing to wear convincingly. "Piccola," he said quietly. "Small one." It wasn't affectionate. It was assessment, placement, a way of putting me somewhere he could control. I should have resented that. Instead, heat rose in my face because his voice made even insult sound intimate. Before I could answer, footsteps thundered down from the stairwell. 3 men in dark suits appeared at once, fast and silent until they saw me. Then the air changed. One reached inside his jacket. Another cursed under his breath in Italian. Boss Raffaele lifted one finger. The men stopped. The silence after that felt armed. His hand opened a fraction, and something slipped from his blood-slick grip. A brass key, old, square-cut, tagged with a tiny stamp number. It struck the platform by my shoe and spun. No one seemed to notice except me. Raphael was still watching my face. "Who else is here?" asked the tallest man. "No one," I said automatically. Raphael's eyes sharpened. He knew I was lying. At the far end of the corridor, Sister Beatrice was finishing her rounds in the chapel annex. "If these men started searching, take the side exit," he said to his men. Then, to me, "You're coming with us." I laughed once because the alternative was shaking. "I'm absolutely not." His expression did not change. "You saw me. They may have seen you see me. That makes you vulnerable." That sounds like a lovely rebranding of kidnapping. A corner of Paolo's mouth twitched on the left. I did not know his name yet, but later I would remember that expression and realize he had liked me from the start. Raffaele stepped closer. Rain-cooled air came with him, layered over expensive cologne and the copper scent of blood. He was taller than I had guessed. Stillness clung to him the way danger did to live wire. "I'm trying," he said very softly, "to keep this gentle piccola." My pulse stumbled. I looked at the station doors, locked for the night. I looked at the men near the stairs, armed, then at the brass key by my boot. No better option. While they watched Raffaele, I bent as if adjusting my shoe and palmed the key into my coat. When I straightened, his gaze dropped once to my hand, then back to my face. He knew. He said nothing. That was somehow worse. He held out his clean hand, the left one. A command disguised as an offer. "Come." I should tell you I refused. I didn't. Because there was blood drying on the lines of his right palm. Because the lemon wrapper still glittered silver near the tracks. Because his eyes had looked destroyed for exactly 1 second before he buried it again. And because I had spent my whole life fixing things I should have left alone. So I went. The heavy station door shut behind me with a lock meant for keeping the night out. It did not. I had imagined that if I were ever kidnapped by the Camorra, the car ride would be louder, more threats, more swagger, more cinematic nonsense. Instead, the inside of Raffaele Mancini's car smelled like leather, rainwater, and the clean citrus thread of the lemon drop dissolving somewhere behind my ribs, because I could still taste it. He sat opposite me in the rear compartment, one forearm resting on his knee while Lucia Greco, the family doctor, stitched the cut at his brow without asking permission from anyone in the vehicle. She was in her 30s, dark-haired, efficient, and visibly unimpressed by blood. "You could have let me meet you somewhere with better light," she said. "You found the wound. I could find a wound in a blackout. That doesn't make you less irritating." Her eyes flicked to me only once. Long enough to catalog. Young woman. Frightened but functioning. No visible weapon. Bad shoes for running. Who is she? Temporary, Raffaele said. Something about that stung, though. I had no right to care. Lucia snipped the thread with her teeth. That always ends well. No one explained further. We drove through the city and up into the hills beyond it, where old money liked to pretend it had clean hands. The gates opened before us, iron scrolling back on a private drive lined with cypress trees. The house beyond them was not a house at all, but a stone villa built to outlast confessions. High windows, pale walls, security cameras discreet enough to be insulting. When the car stopped, Paolo opened my door with formal solemnity. He was broad-shouldered and handsome and a face too expressive for organized crime. If it helps, Signorina, I argued for not traumatizing the witness after midnight. I said we could start first thing tomorrow after coffee. You're not making this sound better. I'm aware. He glanced toward the front steps. Also, if any pigeon flies at me while we're outside, I want it on the record that I've had a difficult day. I blinked. You're afraid of pigeons? He lowered his voice. They're vindictive. A woman in an apron appeared in the doorway, gray streaking her dark braid, flower on one forearm like a weaponized blessing. She took one look at Paolo and clicked her tongue. You look thin again. He placed a hand over his heart. Agata, if you loved me, you would support my discipline. If I loved you, I would bury you with pasta so you'd die happy. Something startled out of me then. Not quite a laugh. Close enough that Rafaela's gaze shifted, catching it. That was the first funny thing anyone said in his house, and somehow it made the danger worse. Human things always did. I was shown to a room on the second floor by a guard who did not speak unless necessary. The bedroom was beautiful in the severe way, rich captivity often. Was cream walls, carved wardrobe, balcony doors locked from the outside. On the table sat a tray with tea and sliced oranges. Beside it, folded neatly, were clothes in my size. I did not touch any of it. I checked the windows. Solid latch. Exterior drop, too steep. I checked the bathroom. No vent wide enough for escape. I checked my coat pocket. The brass key was still there. Good. An hour later, Raphael came to see me. No guards entered with him, though I knew there were men beyond the door. He had changed into charcoal trousers and a black shirt, sleeves rolled once at the forearms. The blood was gone. That was more unsettling than when it had been visible. Sit, he said. I remained standing. No. Something like approval moved briefly behind his face. He shut the door. Not fully. Just enough. That station is no longer safe for you. Because of whoever attacked you. Yes. So now I live in your museum of expensive threats? You live where I can keep you breathing. The quiet certainty of it made me angry on principle. I had a life. His gaze moved over the room, then back to me. Tell me. I didn't want to. That felt too much like obedience, but silence in front of him became its own kind of surrender, so words came out sharp. I restore clocks. St. Marta pays badly. But I get the workshop and a room above the chapel annex. I volunteer with the younger girls twice a week. I buy my own groceries. I don't belong to anyone. At that, a tiny lime deepened near his mouth. Good, he said. Good? It means you won't confuse protection with affection. The sentence landed somewhere deep and cold. I crossed my arms to keep from touching my face. And you won't confuse kidnapping with generosity? That depends on how difficult you plan to be. I haven't decided. You have? He stepped to the mantel, where an antique clock sat dead and elegant under glass. One glance told me the escapement had ceased years ago. Dust had settled behind the Roman numerals. No one had bothered to repair it because rich men often preferred broken things if they were beautiful enough. His finger touched the glass, not the clock itself. I need to know exactly what you saw. You. And blood. Men with guns. Your talent for issuing polite orders. He studied me. I studied his hands. Broad. Scarred across the knuckles. Capable hands. Not gentle-looking. But I remembered how carefully he had taken the lemon drop from me, and that contradiction had become inconvenient. Why did you cry? I asked before I could stop myself. The room changed, not in any visible way. The walls stayed still. The clock stayed dead. But the temperature of his stillness dropped. That, he said, is not a question you ask again. I should have backed down. Instead, I heard my own voice, softer than I intended. I wasn't trying to humiliate you. His jaw shifted once. He looked away first. No triumph came with that. Only a strange, unwelcome ache. A knock sounded. Then Paolo leaned into the doorway holding a silver tray with black coffee and a bowl of almonds. Before anyone starts threatening anyone, he said, Agata would like it known that dinner is at 8, and she refuses to alter the menu for criminals, captives, or men pretending bread is the enemy. Paolo, Raffaella said. Yes, boss. Leave. Paolo set the tray down and sighed toward heaven. One day, Agata will appreciate the body I'm building for her. One day. He glanced at me. If you need anything practical, ask Lucia. If you need anything illegal, ask me. If you need someone to kill a pigeon, I regret to inform you I am not your man. When he was gone, quiet folded back over the room. Raffaele went to the door, then paused. Eat, he said. I'm not hungry. That wasn't a request. His hand rested on the doorframe. The position told me more than a speech would have. He did not need to raise his voice. The whole house had already bent around his will. Then he left me alone with the locked balcony, the dead clock, and the taste of being handled by a man who had no intention of asking twice. By midnight, I was beginning to understand the worst part. Not that I was trapped, that some part of me had already started measuring the shape of his cage. By morning, I had counted 6 cameras in the East Hall, 9 guards between the front steps and the inner courtyard, and 1 old gardener who pretended not to notice armed men crossing the gravel with rifles under tailored jackets. I had also discovered that the dead clock in my room bothered me more than the kidnapping. That was how Lucia found me, barefoot on the rug, hair half fallen from its braid, trying to coax the glass bezel loose with a hairpin. She leaned against the doorway with a mug in hand. Do you make a habit of dismantling other people's antiques before breakfast? Only when they're suffering. Her mouth twitched. You and the boss may have more in common than is wise. She came in without waiting for invitation, set the mug down, and held out a proper tool roll. Fine screwdrivers. Brass tweezers. A loop. You looked miserable with the hairpin. I stared at her. Are you bribing me? I'm making your captivity quieter. That honesty almost made me like her on sight. I sat cross-legged on the floor and eased the clock open. The movement inside was elegant and neglected. Dust on the balance wheel. Dried oil. 1 gear, tooth, slightly bent. Who does it belong to? I asked. His mother. It stopped the night she died. No one's touched it since. My hands stilled. Then maybe this is a terrible idea. Or maybe it's overdue. Lucia watched me work in silence for a while. Outside the tall windows, the sea spread steel blue beyond the hills. From below came the muted rhythm of Italian spoken in low male voices, then cut off all at once. I looked up. He's downstairs. How could you tell? The house got careful. That earned me a sharper glance than before. When I bent back over the movement, Lucia said, You should know something. Raphael isn't keeping you here because he wants a toy. Heat went up my neck. I didn't think you did. She drank from her mug. But no. If he wanted to use you, you'd know. This is something else, which is, frankly, more dangerous. What is it, then? Her answer took too long. I haven't decided. Later, Vittorio Serra came for me. He was old enough to be my grandfather. Silver-haired, impeccably dressed, with the kind of soft voice men developed only after surviving decades of being listened to. He served as Raffaele's consigliere, though he introduced himself as if he managed a bookstore. The boss would like you downstairs, Signorina Vetra. Would he? He would. And if it comforts you, he sounds worse when he is trying to be courteous. That did, a little. He led me through the villa marble floors cool under my soles, oil paintings that looked purchased for intimidation rather than pleasure, hallways where men stepped aside the second Raffaella's name was mentioned. In his office, the only thing I noticed first was not the desk or the armed guard outside or the shelves of ledgers. It was the pocket watch lying open beside his right hand. old silver, railroad style, 2 backs. My breath caught. That's 19th century, I said before remembering defiance. Why is it open on the desk like that? Raphael looked up from a file. You tell me. I moved closer despite myself. The watch had been damaged recently, hairline crack on the enamel dial, hinge bent, tiny scratch marks near the back seam. Someone had forced it and failed. This has a hidden casing, I said, a second back under the first. You need pressure here, not force. I reached, then stopped. May I? He nodded once. The watch was warmer than I expected from sitting on his desk. His heat, maybe. Or mine by the time I realized he was watching my hands. I pressed the seam with my thumbnail and turned the crown half a degree. The inner compartment clicked open. Inside was a folded strip of paper so small it could have been mistaken for lining. Vittorio swore quietly. Raffaella said nothing at all. He lifted the paper with 2 fingers and unfolded it. Train times. Freight codes. Initials. Not enough for me to understand, but enough for the room to thicken. Where did you get that watch? I asked. Raffaella slid the paper into a drawer. A dead man. Something about the answer felt practiced. Vittorio cleared his throat. It matches a pattern we've been seeing in the rail depots. The attacks? I asked. Neither of them answered quickly enough. That was answer enough. Raffaele stood, came around the desk, and took the watch from my hand. His fingers grazed my wrist for only a second. Still, the contact burned with the force of almost. Almost too long, almost deliberate, almost something either of us could name. I stepped back. He let me. I want you to look at something else, he said. He took me down below the villa, through a steel door heavy enough that it locked with a sound you felt in your teeth. His underground rooms were not dungeons, though that might have been easier. They were efficient, clean, maps on walls, weapons and cabinets, a city reduced to routes and vulnerabilities. His empire, drawn in ink. There's a leak, Vitariev said gently, as if discussing weather. Someone is moving arms through the rail system under our noses. I stared at the lines crossing the map, and the watch tells you what? That the person doing it learned from us. The room went still in a different way then. Not formal. Personal. Raffaella's face did not change, but I understood there was history in that sentence. History with teeth. A phone buzzed. One of the guards answered, then swore in Neapolitan. Raffaele took the call, listened. His expression went colder by degrees. What happened? Vittorio asked. Warehouse 12, Raffaella said. Fire. 2 men dead. My stomach turned. Raphael looked at me, and I hated that some part of me looked back like that mattered. This is what being near me costs, he said. Then he opened the steel door and stood aside for me to leave first, like a gentleman escorting me out of hell. I passed close enough to feel the temperature of him. Almost. Always. Almost. That evening, when I returned to my room, the clock on the mantel was ticking again. I had not fixed it. Someone else had. The first time I touched him on purpose, there were bullets somewhere below us. Not close enough to strike the walls. Close enough that the house changed shape around them. Dinner had been halfway civilized until the call came. Agata had set out saffron risotto and sea bass. Paolo had mourned the existence of olive oil as if it were a personal attack on his abdominal ambitions. And I had nearly forgotten I was under armed supervision. Then a man in a dark suit appeared in the archway, murmured to Vittorio, and every fork on the table seemed to become irrelevant. Raphael stood. No wasted motion, no questions in front of me, just that still water danger rising clean to the surface. Upstairs, he said, I'm not a chandelier. You can't just put me in a room every time, Elena. He said my name quietly, and the entire room rearranged itself around it. I went. The gunfire started as I reached the second-floor landing, a burst outside the eastern wall, another near the gate. Men shouting in Italian, terse and fast. Instinct sent me not to my room but toward the small chapel alcove at the end of the hall, where the walls were thicker and the windows narrow. Lucia was already there, dragging a cabinet across the archway with one shoulder. "Help me," she snapped. I did. When it was done, we crouched on the cold marble floor, the air smelling of candle wax and old stone, while the world outside the alcove turned metallic and loud. This happens often? I asked. No. A beat. Enough that you sounded insulted by the question. Lucia almost smiled. Enough. More shots. Then footsteps on the stairs. I tensed. Lucia lifted the small pistol from her stocking holster with a movement so smooth I felt foolish for ever imagining her as only a doctor. The figure coming up took the turn too fast. One hand on the banister. Raffaele. He had blood on his sleeve again, not his own by the look of it. He saw the cabinet, saw us behind it, and something in his face eased by one impossible degree. Open, he said. Lucia did. He stepped inside the alcove and shut us in with the gunfire echoing farther away now, toward the front drive. What happened? Lucia demanded. Diversion. His voice was flat. We lost one car, not the house. He looked at me then, scanning quickly hands, throat, face-like. He needed proof I was untouched. You're hurt, I said. It's nothing. There was a tear along his left forearm, clean through the shirt. When he moved, I saw the dark line beneath. That isn't nothing. I reached before thinking. My fingers closed around his wrist. He froze, not dramatically. The kind of stillness only I would have noticed after days of learning him. But it was there, the pause of a man who had walked through gunfire without blinking and did not know what to do with a gentle hand. His pulse hit once under my fingertips. Hard. Lucia handed me gauze without comment. I pushed his sleeve back. A graze, long and angry, running from elbow toward wrist. Not deep. Enough to bleed. The alcove was small. Too small. Candle smoke. His cologne. The fading gunpowder on his clothes. My knees nearly touched his. When I pressed gauze to the wound, he did not flinch. I think that unsettled me more than if he had. Hold this, I said. He obeyed. That shocked me enough to look up. Our faces were closer than they had ever been. His lashes were wet with rain not fully dried. There was a tiny crescent scar near his chin I had not seen before. A man made of details I noticed because I was trying not to. Lucia turned away on purpose, pretending interest in her phone. Mercy, perhaps. Why the station? I asked softly, wrapping the bandage. That night. He said nothing. I tied the knot and withdrew my hands. He caught my wrist before I could pull away. Not tight, just enough. The contact ran through me with the clean terror of recognition. You asked me if I was lost, he said at last, eyes on mine. No one asks men like me that. The chapel lamp flickered. I waited. His thumb shifted once against the inside of my wrist, then left. My sister did, he said. That was all. He stood before I could answer and moved to the tiny window, looking out through the slit in the stone. I understood then what the tears at the station had been. Not weakness. Memory. A wound so old it had hardened into bone until one foolish question struck exactly the right place to crack it. From behind me, Paolo's voice burst into the hall, outraged and alive. If any of you idiots have brought pigeons into the garage again, I'm resigning and joining a monastery. Lucia snorted. A moment later, Paolo pushed into the alcove, breathing hard, suit askew, hair wrecked. He took one look at the three of us in the candlelit half-dark and sighed. Excellent. Intense eye contact during an active security event. Very healthy, very productive. Report, Raffaella said. Gate secure. 2 dead on their side. 1 idiot on ours with a shoulder wound because he apparently believes cover is for lesser men. Paolo braced his hands on his knees. Also, Agata says if dinner is ruined, she's billing the surviving shooters for the saffron. Even Raffaella's mouth moved at that. Not a smile. The shadow of one. Paolo straightened and pointed at the bandage on Raffaella's arm. You see? This is why I keep saying feelings are an unacceptable workplace hazard. Leave before I test that theory, Raffaella said. Paolo grinned at me on the way out. For the record, Signorina, I like you. You make him look almost house-trained. When the gunfire had fully died and the house exhaled around us, Raffaele walked me back to my room himself. At the door, he stopped. "You should hate this place by now," he said. "I'm considering it." "And me? That should have been easy." "It wasn't." I put my hand on the knob, aware of him behind me, of the heat of his body in the cold hall, of the impossible fact that I felt safer with the man who caused the danger than from the danger itself. "That," I said, "is still changing." His breath left him once, quiet as surrender and nothing like it. When I stepped into the room, I saw the mantel clock clearly for the first time. Someone had cleaned the case, oiled the movement, and corrected the bent tooth exactly the way I would have. Raffaele had not thanked me for opening the watch. He'd learned how I repaired things and answered in my language anyway. My chest tightened around the understanding. The first touch had already happened. Everything after it was damage control. The brass key sat in the hem of my coat for 3 days before the world pried it out of me. I told myself I was keeping it because I did not trust Raffaele's men with anything that could matter, then because I wanted leverage. Then, because I did not know what door it opened, and not knowing gnawed at me harder than fear. All of those things were true. The truest one was worse. The key felt like a secret between me and him, and I had become weak enough to protect that. By then, the villa had acquired rhythms. Lucia checked my pulse with her eyes and my temper with deliberate remarks. Vittorio brought me books I had not asked for and somehow always chose the right ones. Paolo appeared at impossible moments carrying logistics reports, espresso, or grievances about Agata's sabotage of his diet. At lunch, he informed me gravely one afternoon. She looked me in the face and buttered the bread twice. "Monster," she said. My shoulders looked tired. "What does that mean?" "It means she wants me soft and dependent." In the middle of this absurd complaint, 2 armed men crossed the courtyard below. One had dried blood on his cuff. Paolo noticed my eyes follow them and his own expression gentled. "That part doesn't get funny," he said. "No." "No," he agreed. Later that evening, I found Raffaele alone in the study, sleeves rolled, jacket gone, lamplight catching the hard lines of fatigue around his mouth. Papers were spread over the desk in disciplined stacks. Freight routes, photographs, a blurred image from station security that showed the angle of my own shoulder on platform 9, small, beside the dark shape of him. He saw me look at it and turned the photograph face down. "I need the truth," he said. I thought about lying. Again. Then I thought about his sister, about the watch, about the way he had learned the language of gears to answer me without words. So I pulled the brass key from my pocket and set it on the desk. For 1 second he did not move. Then he exhaled through his nose. Not anger, recognition, maybe even relief, though that seemed too generous. "It fell," I said, "at the station. And you kept it." "Yes." "Why?" I wrapped my arms around myself. "Because in my experience, men with blood on their hands don't become safer once they have all the pieces." His gaze held mine. "Fair." That answer startled something soft in me. He picked up the key, turned it once between finger and thumb. Platform 9 storage. Old railway lockers under the maintenance stairs. "You know this because?" I grew up in that station more than in any home that counted. I should have asked more. Instead I said, "Take me with you." "No. I can identify the mechanism. If it's old, if it jams, if there's Elena, I'm useful." The word left me sharper than I meant, because it was not really about the locker. It was about something uglier. The old fear that when usefulness ended, so did welcome. His expression changed with dangerous subtlety. "You think that's why you're here," he said. "Isn't it?" He came around the desk too quickly for me to retreat with dignity. Stopped 1 careful step away, not touching. "Listen to me." His voice dropped, lost all room for evasion. "If I wanted the key and not you, I would already have the key." The sentence struck low and deep. Too much meaning, too little permission to examine it. We went after midnight with only Vittorio, Paolo, and 2 shadow-silent guards. Rain polished the station stone to black glass. The maintenance stairs under Platform 9 smelled of wet concrete, engine oil, and old neglect. Paulo muttered prayers about tetanus and pigeon ambushes while Vittorio hid a smile under his scarf. Locker 417 was rusted and stiff. The key turned halfway and stopped. "I told you," I whispered. Raffaella stood behind me while I knelt at the lock with a tension wrench and a narrow blade Paolo handed over after looking personally betrayed that I knew how to use them. "You pick locks too?" he murmured. "I restore mechanisms. Doors are just arrogant clocks." Paolo breathed. "Marry me." "Stand down," Raphael said. There was a scrape inside the lock. A catch. Then the bolt slid free. Inside the locker sat a leather satchel, damp but intact, and beneath it a false metal floor that looked original until I tapped the corner and heard the hollow note underneath. Raffaella's eyes met mine. Surprise, clean and real. I pried the panel up. Below it lay microfilm, a second folded schedule, and a photograph. Raffaella took the photograph first. His face did not change, which was how I knew it mattered. "What is it?" I asked. He handed it to me. A much younger Raffaele stood on the same platform, maybe 18, arms slung around another young man I recognized only from the cold intelligence in his eyes. Matteo Caruso. Between them was a girl of 12 with dark braids and a stubborn smile. Sophia. On the back, in looping handwriting, "Find the right train this time." My throat tightened. Before I could speak, Paolo's phone buzzed. He answered, listened, and went pale. "Boss. The workshop at St. Marta is on fire." Everything inside me went white. I ran before anyone could stop me. Raffaele caught me at the base of the stairs, one hand closing around my upper arm. "Elena, that's my life." "I know. Do you?" His grip loosened but did not leave. The station lights carved gold into the planes of his face. For once, he looked not controlled, but strained. "I sent men there the moment we got the call," he said. "You running into an active fire helps no one." Tears came then. Hot, humiliating, immediate. Not because of the workshop alone, because the world had finally done what I should have expected from the beginning. It had found the place that was mine and touched it because I had come near him. Raphael lifted a hand like he meant to wipe one tear away. He stopped himself. The restraint hurt more than contact. "We'll go," he said. "Together, but you stay behind me." Behind us, Vittorio was already gathering the satchel. Paolo was swearing at his own heartbeat. The old station around us seemed suddenly full of ghosts and timing. I looked at the photograph of Sofia once more and saw what had been there all along. The boy beside Raffaella in the picture was smiling like a brother. Some betrayals ripened slowly. By the time we reached the cars, I knew two things. The fire at St. Marta was no warning. It was a message. St. Marta still stood. That was the miracle and the cruelty. The old annex roof had burned through above the workshop, leaving the restoration room open to the black-blue dark. Rain hissed through broken beams. Water ran over warped wood and shattered glass in the bent remains of my work table. The smell was unbearable. Smoke, plaster, soaked ash, old varnish giving up its ghosts. I stood inside the ruin at dawn and looked at the place where I had learned to make dead things move again. Nothing in me felt dramatic enough for grief. It was too private for that. Raffaella kept everyone back while I walked the damage. No one touched me. No one offered comfort. They understood somehow that the wrong mercy would split me open. My hands found the one object that had survived mostly intact, a travel clock with a brass face and a crack running straight through the center. It still ticked. Barely. I laughed once. Awful sound. That feels insulting. Paolo, behind me, cleared his throat. "Agata says, if you need a room at the villa permanently, she's already put extra blankets in the blue cabinet, and also she refuses to let tragedy make the men any more self-important than usual." I turned. He stood there with soot on his sleeve and a paper cup of coffee he had clearly reheated 3 times. "Thank you." He shifted, looked uncomfortable with sincerity. "For what it's worth, Signorina, when the boss heard it was St. Marta, I have never seen a man move faster without technically running." My pulse tripped on that. Before I could answer, a crack split the quiet, not thunder. Gunfire, one shot, close, then a second. Raffaele moved before the sound fully arrived. 1 second he was across the ruined doorway. The next he was in front of me, arms sweeping me backward with brutal precision. The window above the old stairwell exploded inward. Glass came like rain. Men shouted outside. "Down!" Paolo yelled, already dragging a fallen shelf to cover. Raffaele shoved me behind a stone support column and drew his weapon in the same motion. The expression on his face was not rage. That would have been easier to survive. This was colder than rage. Efficient. Final. He fired once. Twice. A body hit the courtyard gravel. Another man rushed the side entrance. Raffaele met him in the doorway with a violence so quick my mind refused the first frame of it. By the time thought caught up, the attacker was on the ground and Raffaele was over him, gun pressed low, asking one question in a voice that made every armed man nearby go still. "Who sent you?" The man spat blood. Raffaele fired. The sound lived in my bones. He turned immediately, searching for me. And that was the part I could not unsee. Not the death. The speed with which killing ended for him and fear for me began. He crossed the distance in 3 strides and dropped to one knee. "Look at me." I was shaking hard enough that my teeth hit. "Elena." I looked. His hands hovered at my face, my shoulders not touching until he knew where I was hurt. One cut at my temple from flying glass. Nothing worse. The relief that moved over his features was raw enough to make breathing difficult. "Are you hit?" "No." "Tell me the truth." "I'm not." He nodded once and closed his eyes for half a second, as if the world had nearly taken something from him and he had not yet adjusted to the fact that it hadn't. That was when I saw it fully, what he was. Not a tragic man, not a misunderstood one, a dangerous man who could put a bullet into another human being with no tremor in his hand, and then look at me like my pulse mattered more than his own. It should have pushed me away. Instead, it reached somewhere terrible and honest inside me and found no hatred waiting there. Only fear of how safe I felt under the shelter of someone capable of that. Raffaele. He had known since the station. Not because she was small. Not because her mouth trembled when she was angry. Or because she carried sugar in her pocket like a defiance against bitterness. Because she saw blood on his hands and asked if he was lost. Because she touched his ruined palm with a lemon drop and no agenda. Because the whole world had spent years looking at him and calculating, fearing, obeying, lying. And she had looked at him once and gone looking for the man inside the weapon. That was the first wound she gave him. It was also the one he wanted. Back in the temporary safe house by the sea, the adrenaline left me in shreds. Lucia cleaned the cut at my temple in silence. Paolo stood guard at the window and declared that if anyone tried to assassinate me again before dinner, he would personally file a workplace complaint with God. When Lucia left, Raphael remained. He stood near the balcony doors, hands in his pockets like he was physically restraining himself from doing something else with them. "You should sleep," he said. I close my eyes and hear the shot. His throat worked once. "I know." The words sat between us. Heavy. Shared. I sat on the edge of the bed because my knees had become unreliable. He stayed where he was. Almost. "I saw you," I whispered. "I know." "No. I mean, my fingers twisted in the blanket. I saw what you do, what you are when it happens." He did not insult me by pretending innocence. He did not insult me by pretending innocence. "I know," he said. The lamp beside the bed threw low gold over his hands. His fingers were stained at the cuticles where someone else's blood had dried and been washed away too quickly. I stared at them anyway. "I should be afraid of you," I said. His face gave nothing up. "Probably. That isn't helping. It isn't meant to." The honesty hurt. So did the fact that it steadied me. I looked down at the blanket twisted in my fists. "What scares me is that I'm not the way I should be." The words came halting and humiliating. I don't know what that says about me. For the first time all night, his composure slipped by a fraction. He crossed the room and crouched in front of me, not touching. his forearms braced on his knees like he was holding himself back with muscle alone. "It says," he said, voice rough, "that somewhere in all this you still believe I would bleed before I let anything happen to you." My throat tightened. He lifted one hand, stopped just short of my cheek, then changed course and touched the cut at my temple instead. One careful thumb. Barely there. My breath caught on the smallest thing in the world, almost. When I leaned only a little, only enough to answer without words. His eyes closed once. He kissed me like a man setting down a weapon he did not trust himself to carry. Slow, gentle, no claim in it. Only restraint, and the terrible tenderness of someone who could have taken more and chose not to. When he pulled back, his forehead rested against mine for one unsteady second. Then he stood and put distance between us before either of us forgot why that mattered. Outside, the sea kept throwing itself against the rocks below the villa. Inside, war had finally found our door. The next morning, the villa smelled of coffee, bleach, and men trying to hide blood. That particular silence had become familiar to me by then, the one that settled after violence when everyone pretended the walls had not heard it. I came downstairs in one of Agata's borrowed sweaters and found the kitchen warmer than the rest of the house. Sunlight falling across a scarred wooden table large enough to feed a wedding. Paolo sat at that table with a bandage wrapped around his ribs and a plate of dry eggs in front of him like a punishment from God. Agata slammed down a basket of bread he was not allowed to touch. He looked up at me with the grave dignity of the suffering. "They shot me, and she still won't let me have butter." Agata folded her arms. "If the bullet did not finish you, cholesterol will not get the chance." I laughed before I meant to. It came out thin, but real. Paolo brightened. "You see, I preserve morale. This is a public service." There was color under his eyes he had not earned from sleep. Seeing him hurt tightened something in my chest I had not anticipated. I had known him barely days, long enough apparently. I took the chair beside him. "How bad is it?" "Heroic, but survivable," he said. "It missed anything vital," Lucia said from the doorway, "which is unfortunate for the rest of us." She came in carrying a tray of medication and set 2 pills beside Paola's plate. Her face was perfectly arranged. Too perfectly. There were shadows under her eyes. One sleeve trembled just once before she stilled it with the other hand. I noticed because clocks had taught me that malfunctions announced themselves in the smallest shifts. Raffaella entered a moment later, and every voice in the kitchen thinned to nothing. He wore a dark suit with no tie, the kind of restraint that made him look more dangerous rather than less. Men greeted him from the hall in low Italian. He answered with a nod, took in the room in one glance, and came to stand at the end of the table behind my chair. He did not touch me. The lack of it had become its own pressure. "Eat, piccola," he said. It should not have sounded warm yet. It wasn't, not fully. But it was no longer cold either, and the difference unsettled me more than the word itself. I took a piece of bread just to defy him and Agata at once. Paolo watched with naked envy. "Have one," I whispered. "I would rather die than betray the plan." Agata snorted. "That can be arranged." For one blessed moment the kitchen felt almost ordinary. Then Vittorio stepped in holding a cream envelope. "From Florence," he said quietly. "For Signorina Vetra." I frowned and took it. Inside was an offer on thick paper from a restoration institute I had applied to 6 months ago and forgotten in the daily work of surviving. A 1-year apprenticeship. Housing included. Private sponsorship. Immediate placement due to a vacancy. My hands went cold. "That's good news," Paolo said, then saw my face and amended softly. "Unless it isn't. It's everything I wanted." No one at the table spoke. I looked up. Raffaella's expression had gone very still. The room sharpened around that stillness. Lucia's lowered eyes. Vittorio pretending to study the floor. Agata turning back to the stove with the mercy of someone old enough to know when not to witness pain. "You should go," Raffaele said. The sentence landed like a door shutting. I stared at him. "That's it?" His jaw moved once. "It gets you out. You spent a week telling me I wasn't safe anywhere else. Now you have a route. Take it." Something ugly and wounded rose in me. Because I'm safer away from your mess, or because I'm inconvenient inside it? His gaze snapped to mine, sharp enough to cut. Don't do that. Do what? Pretend I'm dismissing you when I'm trying to save you. I shoved back from the table so fast the chair legs scraped the tile. You don't get to decide that for me. I do when men are trying to set you on fire. The kitchen went dead quiet. I had no answer to the truth of it. Only anger that he had reached it first. I went upstairs shaking. By afternoon I had packed. Not much to pack. Agata's sweaters folded on the bed. My coat. My tools. The cracked travel clock from St. Marta wrapped in one of Lucia's spare towels. The lemon drops in the side pocket. I was latching the case when there was a knock. Vittorio entered without waiting because old men with kind eyes rarely feared doors. I brought your ticket, he said. I took it from him and tried not to notice that my name looked strange, printed on escape. Does he know you're bringing it? He told me to. That hurt more than it should have. Vittorio watched me for a long moment. May I say something unwelcome? That seems to be the theme of the week. A sad smile touched his mouth. He is sending you away because he has finally understood that wanting something is the easiest way to get it killed in his world. I looked away to the balcony doors, where the sea flashed white under late sun. That doesn't make it noble. No, Vittorio said, only tragic. When the car took me down the hill at dusk, no one sat beside me. Paolo had tried and been overruled by Lucia, who pointed at his stitches and called him a dramatic infection risk. Agata kissed my cheek and shoved a paper parcel into my hand on the way out. Bread, cheese, lemon biscuits. Raffaele did not come to the gate. I hated him for that, for letting absence do the work his mouth would not. The station looked exactly as it had the night I found him. Yellow lamps, wet stone, tracks disappearing into dark. Men moving at the edges, only this time I knew what those edges held. I stood on platform 9 with my ticket to Florence in my pocket and the cracked travel clock in my bag. The train had not yet arrived. Wind moved through the rafters with the sound of something leaving. This was the moment, I thought. The real one, the clean exit. No one was forcing me back. No armed man blocked the platform. No command waited at my spine. I could get on the train, sit by the window and let Naples become a city I had once survived. Then I heard voices under the maintenance stairs. 2 men, half hidden in shadow. Mancini girl from the station. Not girl. Woman. Same difference. Matteo wants her breathing till he decides whether the father's papers are real. I went cold all over. Father. My father had died when I was 6. Or that was the story the orphanage had. Rail accident. No body shown to me. No family left. I stepped backward without meaning to. My heel struck the iron bench. The sound rang. The men went silent. I did not wait to be brave. I ran down the side stairs into the old service corridor, into the smell of oil and damp concrete. My heart slammed so hard I could barely hear the footsteps behind me. At the far end of the tunnel was the disused clockroom above the freight office, the one place in the station I knew every bolt and worked hinge. I got there first. Locked the door, dropped to my knees at the housing panel and pried it open with my smallest screwdriver. When the men hit the door, I had already crossed the wires. The master station bell exploded overhead. A deafening bronze scream filled the platform, every corridor, every office, every track. Emergency lights strobed alive. And somewhere above the chaos, men loyal to Raffaele started shouting. I stood in the ringing dark with my ticket still in my coat and understood, with a clarity so brutal it felt clean, that leaving had already cost too much. When the guards found me 10 minutes later, I was not crying. I was furious. And when Raffaele came through the smoke-colored light at the end of the corridor, I walked straight past the men reaching for me and back into his war under my own power. I chose it. No one tried to thank me for coming back. That was one mercy. Raffaele took one look at my face in the station security office and dismissed every man in the room with a tilt of his head. When the door shut, only the hum of failing fluorescents and the distant station bell remained. You heard something, he said. I told him about the men, about my father's papers, about Matteo's name spoken like a knife. He listened without interruption. That was its own kind of violence with him, the full weight of his attention. When I finished, he braced both hands on the desk and looked down at the maps spread over it. There are files, he said at last, on a man named Pietro Vitra. The world tipped by a degree. My father. Yes, you knew. His silence answered first. I stepped back. Since when? Since the satchel. And you said nothing. His face hardened, not at me but at himself. I needed proof before I handed you a ghost. I laughed once raw. How considerate. Elena. No, don't. My throat burned. You keep deciding what I can survive and calling it protection. Something in his expression splintered, quick and hidden. Before either of us could say the next true thing, Lucia burst into the room, white-faced. Move. Now. The station lights died. Not dimmed. Died. For half a second the dark was total. Then red emergency bulbs snapped on along the floor, and men started shouting from the platform above. Lucia grabbed my arm. Service tunnel, come on. I followed because instinct is faster than trust. We ran down the side passage, our footsteps striking sparks off the wet concrete dark, the air thick with diesel and old dust. Somewhere behind us shots cracked, then multiplied. Where is he? I shouted, buying time. That should have sounded like Raffaele. It did, too much. We hit the lower tunnel junction where maintenance carts rested beside the old signal room. Lucia yanked open a steel door I had never seen unlocked. Inside was a narrow chamber lined with relay boxes and ancient communications gear. The smell of ozone clung to the walls. Stay here, she said. I looked at her, really looked. The shaking hands, the bitten lip, the fact that she would not meet my eyes. My stomach dropped before my mind caught up. You knew, I whispered. Her face folded inward for exactly 1 second. He has my brother. That was all the confession she had time for. 2 men came through the opposite door with guns raised. Lucia moved first. Fast, trained, hopeless. She fired once and caught the nearer man in the throat before the second struck her across the temple with the butt of his weapon. She hit the relay cabinet and went down hard. I screamed her name. The second man hauled me upright by the arm. Pain shot to my shoulder. I kicked, twisted bit. He cursed and slapped me hard enough to light my vision white at the edges. Easy, said a voice from the doorway. Smooth, familiar from photographs. Matteo Caruso stepped into the red light like he owned it. He was older than the station picture, of course. Sharper in the face. Better dressed, but the eyes were identical. Cold intelligence with warmth, painted over the top badly enough that only fools mistook it for charm. Well, he said, looking me over. Now I understand the problem. I spat blood onto a shoe. He smiled. Raphael always did have expensive taste in trouble. He took me through the underworks beneath the station, through locked passages and old freight rooms I had never known existed, to a chamber under Platform 9 where the stone sweated salt and the trains above sounded like thunder rolling through the ceiling. They tied my wrists to a chair with cables so tight my fingers went numb. Matteo sat across from me and crossed one elegant leg over the other. You have your father's eyes, he said. I kept silent. Good. That makes this easier. He leaned forward. Pietro Vitra was an accountant who believed numbers belonged to God. Very inconvenient quality in a man working freight books for the Mancinis. My breath came too fast. He found the child routes, Matteo went on. The girls, the border transfers. He thought Raffaele's father would stop it. Instead, he got himself buried by the same system he trusted to correct itself. The room went small and red and airless. You're lying. About some things, yes, not this. He smiled without humor. Your father hid copies before he died. Sophia helped him. Sweet child. Bad instincts. Sophia. The name hit like a thrown blade. Matteo watched my face and knew he had found the wound. That's the part Raffaella never told you, is it? His little sister was in the station that night because she was carrying your father's ledger for him. I wanted to say no. I wanted to deny every word, but there was a terrible coherence to it, too many pieces that should not have fitting all at once. Above us, a train roared past. Matteo rose. I don't actually need you for long, only until he comes down far enough to understand what his mercy costs. When he left, the lock clicked with surgical finality. My wrists burned. The cable bit deeper when I tested it. I closed my eyes once. Then I opened them and took stock. Chair, old metal, one rusted fastener at the back brace. Floor drain, grated, loose on one side. Relay timer on wall, mechanical, not digital. People like Matteo loved modern systems. Stations were older than men like him. Older things always had another language, if you knew where to press. Raffaella Lucia's blood on the tunnel floor told him two things at once. She had betrayed him, and she had done it crying. He had known for 3 days that someone close was bleeding information, known the shape of the leak, even known the tremor in Lucia's hand meant fear, not greed. He had chosen not to confront her yet because one part of him still believed he could save both Elena and the people already trapped in his world. Matteo had always counted on that flaw. Mercy, when applied late, looked exactly like stupidity. I rocked the chair once, twice. Let the back brace strike the stone in the same place until the rusted fastener loosened by a breath. The cable cut skin. I tasted iron and kept going. By the time footsteps returned overhead, I had one hand nearly free and a plan ugly enough to work. The first scream in the tunnel was not mine. It was Matteo's men realizing too late that I had opened the signal relay and sent a freight switch wrong way through the lower line. Everything beneath the station shuddered, and somewhere in the chaos, someone began kicking in the locked door. Too late was coming fast. The door gave on the fourth kick. By then the room was full of metallic shrieking from the diverted line and the yellow-white spray of a ruptured conduit above the far wall. Steam hissed into the chamber, turning the red emergency lights into a fever dream. My right hand was free. My left was slick with blood, where the cable had sawn through skin. The chair had tipped under me. I hit the floor hard enough to bite my tongue and tasted copper. A man came through the smoke first, weapon raised. Not Raffaella. I grabbed the loose drain grate and drove it at his knee with every scrap of fear I had left. Bone cracked. He dropped with a howl. His gun skidded under the relay bank. I crawled for it, my wrist screaming, and got there just as another shadow filled the doorway. This one fired. Stone burst beside my face. Then the shadow was gone, dragged backward by force so violent the whole frame shook. Raffaella entered through steam and gunpowder like something the underworld had sent back for its own debt. He did not say my name first. His eyes did. One look, and I knew he had seen the blood at my wrists. He shot the man behind him without turning. The room fell into that terrible hush that sometimes came after him, as if sound itself knew to step aside. Elena! I tried to stand and failed. He crossed the room at 2 strides and dropped to his knees in the water and oil and grit. His hands framed my face, then my shoulders, checking, counting, making sure I still existed in pieces he recognized. "I'm here," I whispered. His breath broke once. Just once. He cut the remaining cable with a knife from his sleeve. I gasped when circulation slammed back into my hand. "Can you walk?" Yes. It was only half true. He hauled me up anyway, not gentle but careful, one arm banded around my waist. I clung harder than pride preferred. The side of his throat was damp with sweat and tunnel steam. His heartbeat hit hot and ruthless against my forearm. Footsteps pounded toward us. "Friendly," Paolo shouted before I could panic. He appeared in the doorway with a rifle, pale from blood loss and furious about it. "Dear Lord, if I die in a basement under a train station after specifically requesting not to, I will haunt all of you." A laugh tore out of me, wrecked and helpless. Paolo looked scandalized with relief. "Good, she's still herself." "Lucia?" I asked. His face changed, alive, concussed, extremely unpopular. We moved fast through the lower corridor, me half held between Raffaele and the wall, while Paolo covered the rear and muttered inventive hatred toward Matteo's entire bloodline. Twice Raphael stopped to let me breathe. Twice he looked like stopping at all, offended something primal in him because it meant I was hurt enough to need it. At the base of the old service stairs, he eased me against the railing. "Stay here." "No." "Elena." I said no. There was no time for softness left in the corridor. Men shouted above. A train horn blared somewhere too close. I grabbed his sleeve with my good hand. He told me about my father. Raphael went still. He said Sophia helped him. For one bare second, grief opened in his face so completely I saw the boy from the photograph again. Then the door slammed down over it. "It's true," he said. The honesty almost dropped me. "He was trying to get the ledger to a magistrate," Raffaele went on, words cut short by urgency. "My father found out. Matteo chose a side that night and called in the ambush himself. Sophia took the ledger because she thought she could get it to the station master if the adults failed. She was 12. Yes, the word came out like a wound being reopened with a knife. Above us, another burst of gunfire cracked over tile. Raffaele touched my cheek with the backs of his fingers. Nothing more. The gentlest contact in the worst place. "I should have told you sooner." "Yes." He nodded, accepting the strike. "I'll come back for the rest." I knew what he meant. Matteo. The war, the part of him that only surfaced when mercy was no longer possible. Raffaele. His mouth brushed my forehead, a vow disguised as a kiss. Then he stepped back. Almost gone. I heard myself say the truest, uncertain thing I had ever said. "If you don't come back, I won't know what to do with what's left of me." That stopped him harder than a bullet could have. He looked at me like the floor had shifted. Then he bent, pressed his forehead briefly to mine and said, rough and low, "You were never meant to carry this world, Piccola, but if I make you carry it, I come back and help you." It was not love. Not spoken. It was worse. It was binding. He went up the stairs. Paolo remained behind long enough to hand me a lemon drop from his breast pocket, wrapper bent and warm. "Emergency morale reserve," he said. "Agata says I'm ridiculous. But she also packs them in my car, so draw your own conclusions." My hands shook too badly to unwrap it. He did it for me and placed the candy in my palm with comic ceremony. Then he followed Raffaele into the gunfire. I waited in a maintenance niche with Vittorio, who had come down through a second route to extract me. His left sleeve was dark with blood, but he insisted it was impolite to mention. Above us, the station boomed with footsteps, commands, the sharp punctuation of death. I could do nothing except breathe and count seconds against the cracked travel clock in my bag. 100, 200, then silence. Not peace. The worst kind, the kind before truth. Raffaele returned with smoke in his hair and someone else's blood on his collar. Paolo behind him, limping harder. "No, Matteo. He's gone," Raffaele said, escaped, but not empty-handed. In his fist he held the old ledger packet wrapped in oilcloth. The final mystery had stepped into the room with us. And by the way Raffaele looked at the stairs leading back to the world above, I knew the last fight would not happen in darkness. It would happen where everything began. The last battle came 2 nights later under the broken station clock. There had been no real sleep between. Only preparation, triage, quiet grief, and the slow assembly of enough proof to turn Matteo's empire into something even politicians could not pretend not to see. My father's ledgers named routes, bribes, magistrates, border contacts, shell companies hidden in freight insurance and church donations, the kind of corruption so complete it looked almost elegant on paper. Lucia read names until her voice broke. She had survived the tunnel. Barely. The bruise at her temples spread green and purple over her skin like guilt made visible. No one forgave her quickly. Least of all herself, but when she found her brother alive in one of Matteo's transfer sites, chained among boys too young to know the price of being noticed. Something in the house turned from condemnation to a colder, harder mercy. Raffaele gave the ledger copies to men he trusted outside the family and burned the roots his own father had built. That was the first part of what victory cost. The second part waited at the station. We used the old maintenance map I had memorized as a girl. Paolo coordinated vehicle blocks from a folding table in the chapel annex and complained through his headset that if he died before Agata admitted she preferred him broad, he would consider the entire operation emotionally fraudulent. Agata, bandaging Vittorio's shoulder nearby, replied without looking up, "If you die, I'll put your body on a low-carb diet." "See," Paolo said to me, "romance." I was carrying my father's original ledger under my coat when Raffaella found me alone in the clock room above Platform 9. The room smelled of brass, dust, and rain pushing under old window frames. Below us, the station swelled with incoming men, loyalists taking position, police units bought at last by proof instead of fear, engines idling in the storm outside. He closed the door behind him. No guards, no witnesses. His eyes moved to the ledger under my arm. "You should be in the convoy. I should be where the truth is." His mouth almost softened. "Stubborn. That from you feels meaningless." For a second, the old heat of argument threatened. Then it passed, worn down by too much truth between us. He stepped close enough that the air changed. "After tonight," he said, "there may be nothing left of the version of me you can still live with." I looked up at him, really up, at the man who had burned part of his own inheritance rather than let children keep disappearing through it. The man who had killed and would kill again, the man whose restraint had become the shape of his care because he had no gentler language to trust. "That isn't your choice alone," I said. Something opened in his face. Brief, devastating. His hand came to the side of my neck. Warm, steady. He kissed me once, and this time there was no fear in it. Only decision. When he drew back, his forehead rested against mine. "Stay with Vittorio," he said. "You know I won't." Yes, that was the nearest thing to a blessing I was likely to get. The first explosion shook the west entrance hard enough to rattle the glass. Everything after that moved too fast for memory to lay itself down neatly. Men flooding the concourse. Gunfire cracking against old tile. Shouts in Italian ricocheting under the iron rafters, rain blowing through the open central arch and silver sheets. I stayed in the upper service corridor with Vittorio until Matteo's second team breached the east stairs exactly where I had warned they would. One of them got close enough to see me. That was his mistake. I slammed the old signal lever down. The freight gate at the stair mouth dropped like an iron jaw and crushed his rifle arm against the wall. Vittorio shot the second man clean through the chest before his own bad shoulder gave out and sent him to one knee. "Useful girl," he breathed, almost proud. Then Matteo himself stepped onto the platform below. The station stilled around him in the way men do when a story finally enters the room. He had a gun in one hand and the old photograph of Sofia in the other. Raffaele came out of the storm opposite him. No shouting. No villain speech. Matteo only held up the photograph once, then tucked it into his breast pocket like theft repeated out of habit. "You always thought one clean act would save you," Matteo said. Raphael's answer was flat. "You always thought rot was the same thing as strength." They moved at the same time. Shots. Marble splintering. A scream from somewhere down the platform. I lost the line of sight. Found it again just as Matteo's backup came through the freight doors and turned their weapons toward Raffaella's flank. "Down!" I shouted. He turned an instant too late. Vittorio saw it before either of us. He pushed past me, stepped into the corridor opening, and took the bullet meant for Raffaele high through the chest. Everything stopped. I do not know if I screamed. I remember Raffaella's face more than sound. The way grief and murder arrived together in it and left nothing remotely human looking behind. He reached Matteo in 3 strides. What happened then was not dramatic. That was the horror of it. Fast, efficient, hand to wrist, gun stripped, knife turned, one shot low, one blow to the throat. Matteo dropped to his knees on the same platform where Sofia had died, and my father had tried to tell the truth. Raffaella stood over him, breathing hard through his nose. Matteo looked up, blood at his teeth. "You'll still be me." Raffaella's hand shook once. Only once. Then he fired. The station swallowed the sound and gave it back changed. By the time I reached Vittorio, Agata was already there from some impossible route with her apron streaked red, pressing both hands to the wound as if love could be enough, if applied hard enough. It was not. He looked from her to me to Raffaele and smiled with the gentleness of a tired man laying down old weather. "Enough," he whispered. Then he was gone. After the last gun was cleared and the police sirens finally took ownership of the night, I found Raffaele standing alone under the broken clock, with rain dripping from his hair and Matteo's blood on his cuffs. He looked at me like a man coming back from too far out. I put the ledger in his hand. He closed his fingers around it, then around mine. Neither of us said anything for a long time. There was nothing left that words could improve. At dawn, with Vittorio covered, Matteo dead, the routes exposed, and the station full of men too exhausted to lie anymore, Raphael looked at the ruined platform where everything in him had first split open, and he said, "It is over." Grief altered the villa more thoroughly than bullets ever had. For a while, everything happened in lowered voices. Men removed their shoes in halls without being asked. Doors closed softly. Even Paolo seemed briefly cured of unnecessary commentary, which frightened Agata enough that she checked his temperature twice and accused him of attention-seeking from beyond the grave. Vittorio's funeral was held in a small stone church above the sea, where the incense could not quite drown the salt air. Men I had never seen bow to anything bowed their heads when his coffin passed. Raffaele stood through the service with one hand resting over the inside pocket of his jacket, where the photograph of Sophia now lived instead of in a dead man's coat. He did not cry. I had learned by then not to confuse that with absence of feeling. In the weeks after, Naples changed in practical, uneven ways. Arrests. Closed depots. 2 judges suddenly discovering consciences once the ledgers went public through channels Matteo had never believed would turn. Raffaele dismantled sections of the freight arm that had made his family rich. It enraged old allies and frightened loyal ones. It also made it possible for boys and girls who had vanished into invoices to stay visible. The house hated the disruption. I loved it. My place in it remained stranger, not captive, not guest, not exactly safe from rumor either. The papers called me a witness, an heiress to a dead accountant, a mistress, a saint, a fool. None of them got it right. Agata handed me a broom and ignored the headlines. Lucia brought me the surviving pages from my father's notebooks in careful stacks, each one a wound and a gift. Paolo asked if being notorious meant I could finally convince Agata that bread was a political necessity. "It is not," Agata said. "It is now about freedom," he argued. One afternoon, when the first true autumn wind hit the terraces, I found Raffaele in the old blue room at the back of the villa. The room had once belonged to his mother. It had been locked for years. Now the windows were open. Dust cloths lay folded on chairs. On the center table sat the travel clock I had saved from St. Marta, repaired at last. The cracked face remained. It still kept perfect time. Raffaele stood beside it, jacket off, tie loosened, looking almost startled that I had found him there. "You opened the room," I said. He glanced around once. "You said houses should not preserve damage just because it's old. I said that about a clock. You say most important things sideways." That silenced me, mostly because it was true. I walked to the table and touched the brass edge of the travel clock. "It works." "It did after you stopped pretending you were too angry to fix it." "I was angry. I noticed." He came closer, slow enough for me to step away if I wanted. I did not. Outside, the cypress trees hissed in the wind. Somewhere downstairs, Paolo yelped in outrage, and Agata informed him he had no right to complain about soup if he insisted on surviving. Raffaele's hand found the small of my back, just rested there. Warm, certain, no force in it. "I have something for you," he said. That should have alarmed me more than it did. He took a small velvet box from the table and set it beside the clock. For one panicked second I thought ring, thought spectacle, thought all the wrong kinds of permanence, but inside lay a key, not ornate, brass, newly cut, to the workshop annex, he said. I stared. What workshop? The one being rebuilt beside St. Marta, with proper wiring this time. And locks you can change yourself, since apparently everyone around you has opinions about doors. My throat closed. You rebuilt it? With help. A pause. Agata chose the tiles. Paolo argued for a radio and lost. Unfairly, Paolo shouted from some distant room, proving he was eavesdropping with professional commitment. A laugh broke out of me before the tears could. Raffaele watched my face like it was something dangerous and holy at once. I'm not offering you a cage, he said. I know the difference now. I picked up the key. It was warm from his hand. What are you offering? His mouth changed. Not smile. Truth approaching. A life, he said. One that can hold what we are without lying about it. The air left my lungs in pieces. He took something else from his pocket then. Smaller box. This time I knew before he opened it. A ring. Old gold. No diamond large enough to look theatrical. Just one pale stone with age in it and history. My mother's, he said. She wore it because my father asked badly and loved well after. That almost undid me on the spot. He did not kneel. Thank God. It would have made it easier to romanticize, and nothing between us had survived by being easy. I won't promise safety, he said, or innocence. Those would be insults. His thumb brushed once over my wrist where the cable scar had faded to a white line. But I can promise this, no part of my life will ever be built again in a way that asks you to disappear inside it. I could not speak immediately. So I did the more honest thing. I took his hand first, then the ring. Ask again, I whispered, because my voice had become unreliable and I wanted to hear him choose it knowing that, for the first time since I had known him, real vulnerability entered his face without disguise. Elena Vitra, he said quietly. Stay. Stay with me. Build something here with me. Marry me. The answer cost something, which was how I knew it was true. Yes. His eyes closed. When he opened them, the relief in them was so naked I had to look away for a second just to survive it. He slid the ring onto my finger with hands steadier than mine. Then he bent and pressed his mouth to my knuckles, to the scar at my wrist, to the place beneath my ear where my pulse lost all discipline. Piccola, he said. This time it did not mean small. It meant home. Downstairs, Paolo shouted, If there are tears, I want it noted. I predicted this and deserve cannoli. Agata replied, You deserve vegetables. Raphael laughed under his breath against my hair, low and astonished by himself. That was the sound I carried into evening. Something quiet, something almost ordinary. 9 months later, the station smelled like rain, oil, and fresh paint. The workshop annex beside St. Marta had new windows now, better locks, and a line of orphan girls who treated screwdrivers as sacred objects when I was looking and as sword-fighting equipment when I wasn't. The youngest, Morella, had decided that balance springs were mean silver worms. I had not yet convinced her otherwise. My name on the door still startled me sometimes. Elena Vetra Restoration. Below it, in smaller letters, Agata insisted on commissioning despite my protests. Lost things repaired here. I should have hated the sentiment. Instead, it caught me in the throat every single morning. By then, I divided my time between the workshop and the villa by the sea, though villa had quietly become home in my head when I wasn't paying attention. Lucia ran a clinic funded from assets Raffaella had torn out of the old freight empire and redirected with almost vindictive precision. Paolo oversaw legitimate transport now and complained that respectability was ruining his mystique while eating contraband almond pastries. Agata still pretended not to bake for him. 2 months earlier, she had finally taken his face in both floury hands and kissed him so thoroughly he forgot his own diet for a week. He brought that up often. No one told him to stop. Late that afternoon, with thunder gathering over Naples and the girls gone back inside for supper, I heard the familiar low engine at the curb outside the station gate. I looked up too quickly. That still happened. Raffaele came through the annex door without an umbrella, dark suit marked with rain at the shoulders, tie loosened as if the day had fought him for it. Men still went careful when he entered rooms. The city still quieted around his name. None of that had changed. What had changed was the way he looked for me first. Always. He stopped just inside the door near the bench where disassembled clock hands lay and ordered silver rose. The room smelled of brass polish and lemon oil from the rag in my hand. He looked tired, not physically alone. Tired in the older place, the one behind the eyes. For one heartbeat the whole year folded in on itself, the empty platform, the blood, the impossible grief in a man everyone else called monster. So I reached into my coat pocket, found the lemon drop I had started carrying again out of habit, or superstition, or love, and asked the question the same way I had the first night. "Are you lost, mister?" He went completely still. It still landed. That was the terrible, beautiful truth of it. After everything, it still reached him in the same unguarded place. I unwrapped the candy and held it out. The paper gave its small, bright crinkle between my fingers. His gaze dropped to it, then to me. This time, when he took it, he didn't stop at my palm. His fingers closed around my hand too, turning it over until my ring flashed softly under the workshop lamp. "Every time you do that," he said, voice low, "it costs me." I smiled a little because some part of me would always be shy in front of his honesty. "What does it cost you?" The answer came without armor. The part of me that remembers how to survive without this. Emotion moved through me too big for elegant language. I settled for the truth nearest at hand. "Good." A laugh left him. Quiet, real. Outside, rain began ticking at the windows. Inside, the restored travel clock on my shelf marked the hour with a restrained, faithful chime. Crack still visible. Time still true. He stepped farther in and touched the scar at my wrist with his thumb. The same gesture as the night he had not let himself take more. Only now, there was no restraint in it, no fear of what gentleness implied, just belonging. "How bad was the day?" I asked. He considered lying and decided not to. "Bad enough that I came here before home. You are home." His eyes changed. That too still landed. He drew me close by the waist, careful of the tools on the bench, careful of me in the way he never stopped being, no matter how many months passed without blood at the door. His forehead lowered to mine. Almost, once upon a time. Not anymore. "I met with the Port Union," he murmured. "Half of them still think legitimacy is a temporary mood. Maybe wear fewer terrifying suits. They're not terrifying." I glanced at the rain-dark coat, the scar at his brow, the expression on his face that had made senators stutter. "That's adorable." His mouth finally softened into the smile he saved for almost no one. "Adorable," he repeated as if testing whether the word broke against him. I reached up and straightened his tie only to loosen it again. The intimacy of that still startled me more than kissing ever had. From outside came Paolo's voice, muffled through the corridor. "If you two are doing emotional eye contact in the workshop again, Agata says dinner is in 20 minutes and she refuses to let romance ruin the pasta texture." Raffaele closed his eyes once, resigned. He has developed no caution. He's happy. That's not the same skill. I laughed, and some of the day came off his shoulders just hearing it. When we stepped outside together, the rain had gone soft. Street lamps smeared gold over wet stone. Down the platform, Sister Beatrice shepherded the girls toward the chapel with stern mercy and an umbrella losing the battle. Raffaella paused beneath the awning and looked along the tracks, stretching into the blue-black evening. Not lost now. Not like before. I slipped the lemon wrapper into his breast pocket beside the old photograph of Sophia, where he kept it still. Bright paper next to grief. Sweetness beside memory. An answer without fixing anything. He covered my hand over his chest. "Piccola," he said. The word held all 12 months inside it. The blood. The station. The war. The workshop. The life we had built out of things that should have stayed broken and somehow didn't. I leaned into him and listened to the train rails hum before the next arrival. Ordinary, I had learned, was the most radical miracle in the world. And if love asks you to choose with open eyes to take the man, the cost, the shadow that will never fully leave him, and the tenderness he built anyway. Tell me this. Would you have chosen Raffaele, knowing what it took for him to become hers?